Hello, 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 and welcome back to Coach's Corner. It is a Monday, July 29th, a little bit later in the evening, but that's all right. We have a great show for you today, a packed show, I'd say, for at least the first couple topics. We're going to dive into some foosball. We have an AFC team that did pay their playoff quarterback. We have an NFC team, a historic franchise that continued their line of paying their good quarterbacks that sat. And we also have an NBA champion that did not play in the Olympics game one for the USA. But, I do have to give a little bit of an update for the people. Tomorrow, probably no show because I'll be moving stuff. And so for that reason, I probably won't be in the evening available or I'll just be tired. And so for that reason, I'm not going to, try and push out a show that won't be high quality. So for that reason, I'm going to probably take tomorrow off, but we will be back on Wednesday. With all that being said, we do have to start with the NFL, the National Football League. Two quarterbacks, not one, but two quarterbacks were paid over the weekend. Neither of them was Dak Prescott. Neither of them was Brock Purdy. But one of them was Tua Tagovailoa for the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins, rewarded Tua with a healthy contract, a 4-year contract. And it was interesting because he got significantly less than Trevor Lawrence. And I'll just come out and say I don't love Tua. I just don't. It's not really ever been my kind of quarterback that I thought it would work, after his hip injury. I feel like that's kind of been proven. I don't know if his hip injury has everything to do with how his arm isn't like that great. Like he doesn't have a live arm, and frankly, I think he's too inaccurate on targets, when you need him to in that intermediate space. But I still think this is a good deal for Miami. And it's because of what the Giants did mainly. And that's when they paid Daniel Jones. They paid Daniel Jones a lot of money. And I think it's safe to say Tua is better than Daniel Jones. Frankly, I think he's far and away better than Daniel Jones. Because the thing about the Dolphins is they haven't had a good quarterback run. They haven't had, I'd say, a Pro Bowl caliber talent at quarterback since Dan Marino. And, Ryan Tannehill was there for a brief stint, but they didn't get the most out of him. And I feel like they're getting the most out of Tua. And like I said, it's not great because Tua does have guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, the best running game in the NFL last year. Mike McDaniel scheming it up. And although his offensive line isn't great, I feel like he has, had a levy of weapons that he has been able to work with that has really propped up his production. And so when he does have those talents, his numbers do look kind of gaudy, I think, and they look good. And what I think is interesting about this deal is the fact that Miami was so willing to do it before this season. And that's mainly because I feel like Tua in a vacuum is replaceable in the same way that Jared Goff was replaceable in Los Angeles. Plenty of people have made the comparison because, it's a Mike McDaniel, Sean McVay, kind of the same kind of style of offense. And the teams are kind of at similar points where it's like they can make the playoffs. They can, compete in a playoff game, but they don't really have that championship expectation. And the thought process is basically like what the Rams did, where it's like Jared Goff is a great player. He's really good in Detroit now, but he wasn't what the Rams needed. And I kind of think the Dolphins are set up similarly, where Tua is a good player and he probably will be an NFL starter for at least another half a decade. That's 5 years. But in the end, I don't think he is the best fit for this offense. I don't know if they can win a Super Bowl with him. I think they can win a lot of games. They did it last year. They won 11 games. But in a way, they just weren't really, limping into the playoffs. They really didn't really have a shot against Kansas City. Kansas City smothered them, and there was never really a doubt. And like I said, I think it's probably is smart to commit to a quarterback that you do know is good. It seems like people like him, in the building. But it felt like Tua was one of those franchise tag him and wait kind of guys. And it's weird that hasn't happened more, I think, in the NFL since Kirk Cousins, really. Kirk Cousins and Dak both kind of were in that same category. And I think we got to the point where we were like, hey, it's good to pay these guys. And Kirk Cousins gotten a boatload of money since then. Dak Prescott's gotten a boatload of money since then. And Tua, I felt like was in that same category, where if he did have just another year that was the same as last year, then he would, he'd probably get his contract. And that felt like the smart thing from the team's perspective. Now, Tua, I get it because he has had some injury concerns here and there. You don't know if he'll last another year. So it was obviously smart to get that money immediately. It's one of those things where I felt like it was a tad bit rushed and it was a tad bit, just a little interesting on the Dolphins' part that they were so willing to do this. And, obviously, I think it speaks to what they think about Tua inside the building more than what the media thinks outside. Because I will be honest that I think a lot of the media is a little bit harder on Tua than they are most other quarterbacks. But I think it is because similarly, we all kind of think like, hey, he's good, but he's not the special franchise guy that we have. Like we see a lot of guys, especially in his same draft class where you have Joe Burrow, you have Justin Herbert, you have Jalen Hurts. Even Jordan Love got $8 million more than him. And the thing is, Jordan Love only played 9 games last year, and 9 good games. And he was really, like I said, those last 5 games was really when he won that contract. But for the rest of the year, he was figuring it out. And it was just surprising to see Tua get this low of a money, especially, like I said, compared to Trevor Lawrence, who got a good extension. I just find it's one of the more interesting extensions I think we've had for a quarterback, really since Daniel Jones, and mainly because I don't think anyone thought Daniel Jones was good / worth the contract he was given. But Tua, obviously, they believe he's worth that contract. And I frankly, I think he probably will live up to it. I mean, like I said, it's not one of those massive monster deals that we normally see a lot of franchise guys sign after their rookie season, especially nowadays when it's like every guy's trying to top the next guy. Tua took a very, I think, team-friendly deal for, what he could have been asking, what he could have, held out, what he could have done here. I think he bailed out the Dolphins a little bit, and the Dolphins, I think, rewarded him in that way by paying him now rather than later. And I mentioned that other young player, and that was Jordan Love. Packers did not let Jordan Love hold out of camp very long. I talked about that last week, that he was going to hold out. Obviously, they were like, hey, let's just go ahead and get this done. And I find that to be an interesting move too, because it is like doubling down, like, hey, Packers, we made a really good decision here. We really like what we have. And frankly, I think this is a great deal because, people are going to point to the playing time. You don't know what you're going to get. But I think you saw last year towards the end of the season, Jordan Love really matured and grew up quickly. He won a playoff game on the road in Dallas. I think that was in a blowout too. I think that was about as good as you can get for him. And Jordan Love, obviously, he wanted to he wanted to get his contract now, because if he did wait another year, maybe he has a rocky road and isn't great. But overall, I think Jordan Love did a great job getting locked up here. I think the Green Bay did a great job, kind of locking him in now. Because like I said, I pointed at the Trevor Lawrence contract as really kind of a benchmark for a lot of guys that, I think Brock Purdy could get more than Trevor Lawrence. I think Dak Prescott could ask for more than Trevor Lawrence. A guy who has shown the flashes, has decent production, not otherworldly, but decent production. And, he settled for $275 million. Where you have these guys taking a little bit less, but I think they probably have shown less than Trevor Lawrence in the short time. Just it's very intriguing. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I think it's a fair deal, and like I said, I think this deal I like more because I do think Jordan Love's fit here in Green Bay is a lot more concrete than Tua is in Miami. Because like I said, it never felt like Miami wanted to truly commit until I guess they really gave him the contract, where he was flirting with hey, are we going to trade him for whoever? And they still could. They still very well could. Like I said, I think Jared Goff got a contract before he was traded. So it could happen, but I do feel like Love fit Matt LaFleur's offense really well. And I think, like I said, it's part of the reason why they were so willing to pay him now and get that out of the way, because now there is no doubt he's the guy. That you never know when you get that first year starter. You don't want to be like, hey, this is the guy. Let's go ahead and lock him up. Kind of like baseball teams. Like I think about the Braves. Obviously, is they trade for a guy, they immediately extend him. Where basically before he even plays for the team, he's extended. Where Jordan Love, before he even took a snap, he could have been extended for this type of deal, but he decided, I'd play out the year, showed that he probably was worth it, and they got the deal done. So I don't want to I'm not Jimmy Hot Takes over here being like, hey, both of these deals are trash, bad deals. I don't like the Tua deal as much, but I think that was probably a smart idea to lock him up. And like I said, you still had the flexibility, I think, to trade him, despite people being like, hey, you extended him. Why did you trade him a year later? Because an opportunity came up that probably fits better. I point to the Falcons and maybe Kirk Cousins, because like I said, Kirk Cousins fits in that type of offense really well. Maybe in 2 years when Michael Penix is ready, it's one of those things where don't get locked up on the whole commitment thing here. I think it is just a process or a step in the process where they probably had to pay him just to make sure that they don't have to do this long dance with Tua, and Tua gets his money up front and everything seems all right. And then with the Packers, obviously they waited 2-3 years to get Jordan Love in there. He showed up. He won them a playoff game, was competitive in a different playoff game against the team that went to the Super Bowl. So, it was one of those things where it's it just made sense to go ahead and get this done, so that way you don't have a situation like Dak Prescott had or has now, where he's basically like, hey, I might not be here if we don't win a playoff game. Dak Prescott will not be a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. I can almost guarantee you that. Now, I don't know what their plan will be after that, but that feels pretty concrete that if that is the route that it goes this year, that he's probably on the way out. But now Packers don't have to deal with any of those questions. The Dolphins really don't have to, at this point now, that where a lot of teams would. But hey, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with both of these guys. Like I said, I like both of them. I do think they have their place in the NFL where, Tua's a little bit shakier, but I think Jordan Love has room to grow, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. So with all that being said, let's go up to some sports that are happening right now. The Olympics. I'm not going to dive into the whole Olympic Games like I'm a gymnastics expert. I won't do a handstand on camera for you because, like I said, not an expert in gymnastics, not a fencing expert. I'm not a rowing the boat expert. I saw Great Britain, I think, is Great Britain or Australia killed that event. It was interesting. And I don't know how to judge horses that dance around while someone is sitting there in a fancy suit. But what I think I do know a little bit of, at least, is basketball. And the USA team played, and I know I kind of keep harping on this USA team, but they just keep making decisions that I just don't think are smart. And, the decision they made, they blew out Serbia. So, that really, wasn't really the storyline here. The storyline was Jayson Tatum not playing. And, I think Jayson Tatum is probably getting a bad rap right now just because of, people want to debate him as a top 5 player, and then a top 5 player doesn't get played on the Dream or the Team USA team. And now it's like a whole debate. We see guys who probably are not worthy being on the court, over Jayson Tatum. And it's just a fishy scene, it's just one of those things where it's just are we doing the politics of Joel Embiid, was guaranteed a starting spot, and that's why he even played in the Olympics? And because he has no business starting. We've seen it now. I've told you, I've complained to you, the listener, that Joel Embiid doesn't belong on this team, much less the floor. He got subbed out in 3 minutes. He was minus 11, I think, or minus 34. He was terrible. And the fact that Jayson Tatum, a guy who, I do think he's a talented player. I do think he's probably would help this Team USA. A wing player that can play both sides of the ball. I think that you can find a spot for him, and even over his teammates. Drew Holiday and Derek White are really good players. They really were fantastic on Sunday or whatever that. Yeah, Sunday. But I don't know if they're Jayson Tatum. I don't know if some of these guys it just is weird to me. I don't know what is happening with Team USA. I don't know what Steve Kerr's doing. Like I said, it's a weird situation with Team USA where politics of who's going to play and what's being said maybe behind the scenes, like how is this going to affect them. Jayson Tatum is going to have to play in this next game. Otherwise it's just going to be this whole situation again where you have Joe Schmoes like me and people on the radio talking about like, hey, why is Jayson Tatum not playing? And that becomes the story more than Team USA winning, which they did. And interesting stat I do want to throw out there for Team USA and Serbia's game was this is just my pushing the Nikola Jokic as the best player in the world narrative, but the score when Jokic was on the court was 81-81. When Jokic was off the floor, Serbia was outscored 29 or 25-3. So the difference is right there, where Jokic, the game was tied when he was there, was not when he was not there. So that was just an interesting stat for me to push with my Jokic narrative, and I appreciate you for listening for that. So I think that will just about do it for me today. Like I said, it's trade deadline, so we'll probably come back with that on Wednesday, talk about some of the deals that'll happen tomorrow. Lane Thomas went to the Guardians, which I think is a good move for them to kind of go in to be buyers as a team that's really going good this year. Jazz Chisholm for the Yankees is going to be a weird thing to watch, but I think it'll ultimately work out, hopefully, for them. We'll see if he adjusts. I have his jersey bear back there. The only time I can put up a Florida Marlins jersey is Jazz Chisholm getting traded. But trying to think of some of the other deals. Cardinals and Dodgers both got better because the White Sox are selling off pieces. We'll see. We'll see how some of these other players unfold. Who goes where. We'll probably get back to that on Wednesday. But until then, I am your host, Lucas Kochevar. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. Goodbye.